All right. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Celtics Beat. You got Adam Kaufman here with you as normal. Evan Valenti is producing, but he won't be joining us on air for this one. So in a way, he's still with us. But of course, it's not about me. It's not about Evan. It's about our featured guest every week. And this week, it is a man we just, we saw an article during the week and we said, we got to talk to this guy. And it was just overdue to get him back on the show anyway. And that is Steve Bulpett, now of heavy.com. Of course, started that job in last 2-3 weeks, somewhere in that general vicinity, I think, although time is kind of passing me by. Steve, congrats on the new role, first and foremost, and welcome. It's good to see you.
You as well.
So, before we even get into, obviously, your article about Jaylen Brown and your thoughts on the Celtics and all that good stuff, just a little bit about the new gig. Is this more a casting a wider net on the NBA than you were? I mean, I know you were already covering the entire league when you were at the Herald for all those years, but what's this role encompass for you?
Yeah, it's a wider situation. True, you're correct. I was covering the league as well at the Herald, but I was really primarily responsible for Celtics. That was the main beat. Now I don't cover games anymore. I don't have to write up game reports, and it's basically using the contacts that we've gotten over the past billion years to find stuff out and report it. So yeah, it was a good situation. Sean Devaney, who many of you know, was the NBA writer for the Sporting News for a number of years. He reached out, and I've been really lucky. I was in a situation where I could kind of pick spots and didn't necessarily have to work, but wanted to, but was waiting for kind of the right thing. And when this came along, the opportunity to work with Sean, and the contract that they presented, it looked really good. And I said, this is what I should do. So I'm grateful to
Sean on this show too.
Pardon me?
I said we're big fans of Sean on this show too.
No, Sean's
we love him.
It was a good guy to know, and as I've come to know, a really good guy to work for.
Well, again, congrats, obviously, and I'm sure people will be, keeping a close eye on everything that you're saying, writing about the league, and especially when there are times that there is a Celtics focus. And just for anyone that isn't caught up through the most recent game against the Hornets, just the general where are they now is where I tend to begin these shows. The Celtics, they've won 3 in a row, 5 of 6, look as good as they've looked all season. They're as healthy as they've been all season. They start a 3-game trip in Detroit on Friday, which takes them through stops in Orlando and Brooklyn as well. Honestly, it is not outlandish to suggest Boston could sweep this trip. And I know the Nets are there, and I know the Nets are ahead of them in the standings, but remember the game's in Brooklyn. Kevin Durant is out. James Harden is banged up. He's probably going to play, but he's banged up. Kyrie Irving can't play in home games, so the Nets are not going to look anywhere near full strength. And as it stands right now with this little streak here, putting the a season high 3 games over 500. They are 9th in the East, still in the mix in the play-in tournament, not a guaranteed playoff spot, but they're a couple games behind the Nets for that 6th seed. And again, playing at, kind of an equal level standings wise. So we'll see where it all goes. And the trade deadline is 1 week away, folks, 1 week away. So we'll get into all of that here on this show as well. But, where we need to begin, Steve, and just so you know, this is not just lip service. I was on the Celtics Lab podcast a couple of days ago, not to be confused with us here at Celtics Beat, but all part of the CLNS family. So check them out as well. I was on the Celtics Lab podcast, and it was, an hour after your story about Jaylen Brown dropped. And I was asked about it. And I said, listen, if anyone writes anything about the Celtics, the sort of mantra among C's fans or talking heads over decades at this point, over the last several years, has been, okay, but who wrote it? Who wrote it? And, even if it was a very reliable national correspondent, could have been Woj, could have been Shams, could have been Stein, could have been, whomever, like you name it. It was always, yeah, but has Bulpett said anything about this yet? So when you wrote this article about Jaylen Brown, which for anyone that Didn't get a chance to see it on heavy.com. It's kind of a, if this then that sort of concept. The headline was sources Celtics Jaylen Brown could seek June divorce if team falters. And of course, the big line that caught people's attention, multiple sources have told heavy.com that absent the team getting its act together, which by the way, it has, right now, but absent the team getting its act together and playing more to its potential, Brown could be the one to acknowledge that the mix isn't right and seek a move now. There are a number of different things about this that I think we could get into that I think are interesting, but just overall, I mean, do you feel like in your reporting and talking to the people that you have that anything in terms of unhappiness from Jaylen Brown and his camp is imminent?
No, I mean, that was the point, is that, and I look in terms of presentation of the story, have I thought about it 1,000 times since it was posted? Sure. I mean, the most important thing is getting your points across, getting them received properly. It's up to me to make sure it gets read properly. And, there's some question here whether I did it properly or not. The idea here, and again, started off with that Jaylen Brown, this is what he wants to work here. But there have been frustrations over the course of the year. And the reason I even got to this story is, I'm talking to people across the league. Obviously, that's basically the job. There are two phones sitting right there, and they, and I make calls and they ring, and that's basically the job. I mean, and there are other people, a lot of other people around the league doing the same thing that I'm doing. But when you're getting calls about Jaylen Brown, what kind of guy is he? How is he to deal with? And then you say, okay, well, where's this coming from? And they say, well, there's a belief around the league that that was communicated to me that, Jaylen Brown might be available. And then, okay, well, further, okay, might be available when? And what came back then was most likely, if at all, around the draft. Well, and so why are you calling now? Because maybe, these are teams that covet Jaylen Brown, that figure, hey, look, maybe we should get in on this now, or try to, or see what we're going to have to do. And in one case, a GM told me, hey, you got to start preparing for these things, and because you have to be able to move fast if they show up. And so that's where these people weren't getting this idea out of nowhere, out of thin air. These teams around the league. And upon further investigation, it was like, yeah, there was a point where I think everyone will understand that everyone around the Celtics was terribly frustrated with this team and the way it was playing. I mean, that hero ball, the one-on-one stuff, I'm sure on your shows, there were 1,000 people, calling up to decry what was going on. And so, yeah, that's, that's the basic germ of it. I can get into it further, but go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, I think, to me, the most interesting angle, because, it's, I think it's like, it's human nature, right? It's kind of common sense that, you could look at anybody in any walk of life and say, man, if they're not happy, they may look for a different situation, right? Like putting it just at its most like basic, truest form. But what's really interesting here is, all the commentary over really the last couple of years surrounding the season, they've been up and down this roller coaster of, ride of health or COVID or not playing well, inconsistencies, all of it has always been, former players or media people or execs, like, you got to split up the Jays. Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown can't coexist. They're redundant. They don't belong together. There's a better way to build this team, and on and on and on. This is what we've always heard. This is what people have said. But where it typically hasn't come from is, one of these guys is upset and may want out. And it's not like it's this new concept by any means in what is largely a players run league. You could think of 1,000 examples in very recent history, whether it's, Lillard right now in Portland, obviously Ben Simmons in Philadelphia, James Harden going back to Houston, Kevin Durant not long ago, Kyrie Irving here. Like there are so many superstars, LeBron, even like guys that are unhappy that want to change the scenery, but we've never really talked about Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown that way, just because, really until now, there haven't been those little tidbits, those little crumbs of information that say, you know what, like this is a path, even though these guys are under contract, one of them may want to take sooner than later. I guess I would just wonder, what's your view of how well these guys can coexist and take this team where they want it to be and where the team wants it to be, versus one of them, even at a young age and again being under contract still, could get a little fed up and say, you know what, I do have some power despite having a contract, and I'm going to exercise it.
Look, I think that these two guys, A, should want to stay together, and B, should flourish together. And C, the fact that they haven't yet is mind-boggling to me. And trust me, it's mind-boggling to people around the Celtics as well. I mean, I go back to the conference finals in 2018, Game 7. The Celtics have the Cavaliers on the Garden floor. The Cavaliers were looking, I don't think they wanted to go and face Golden State because they knew what was going to happen. And interestingly, as I've written a bunch before, that the Warriors were rooting hard for the Cavaliers that day. And this is the Celtic team without Gordon Hayward, who's been injured the entire year since Game 1, without Kyrie Irving, who's out for the year at that point. The Warriors did not want to face those Celtics. They were much more of a threat to them, as in their eyes, than were the Cavaliers. And the Celtics botched up that game and again, I'll say it, it's not guys being jerks. It's guys saying, hey, give me the ball, I'll go make a play. I'll take responsibility, I'll go do this. And that it threw the team off. It killed them. And it's killed them at different points ever since that. You look at playoffs and, a couple of years ago, the conference finals, did they get caught in a little bit of hero ball? Well, everyone around the team, their coach was saying, So this from Brad now to Ime to the people around in the organization before, the other coaches, they've been trying to get these guys to play more team ball, and not just them, everyone, not just those two guys, but understanding the value to them. And you see when they play the right way, how well it works, which makes it crazy that they don't do it all the time like they're doing it now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm not one of those that says, Jayson Tatum, he's just pounding the ball. This is crazy. He's got to give the ball up. If I'm the Celtics, I want the ball in Jayson Tatum's hands as much as possible. But I want it in his hands after he's passed and cut and in a position to catch the ball and finish a play with a dribble or two maybe, but catch and shoot, as a finisher, both these guys. And again, this is stuff I've written for the Herald over the years and, tweeting, and it's crazy. I think you'd agree when you see how well they can play when they play that kind of basketball. It's crazy to think, why don't they do it all the time?
Well, so let me ask you this then. With the trade deadline as we sit here right now, a week away, I'm not under the illusions that anything monumental is going to happen on February 10th. And, maybe Dennis Schroeder could go, maybe Josh Richardson should go, but I think like that's the height of something extreme or whatever happens with this team. I think if something big is going to happen, it's in the offseason, and we can talk about that. But just my, initial thought here is, you've watched as much basketball as anyone who's ever been on this show. You certainly know the game, the Celtics, and these two guys that you were just talking about in Tatum and Brown. What's the best way to make this work? What's the sort of, I don't know, to date this, I don't want to call it unanswerable question because they've gone to multiple conference finals. They've certainly shown potential, but what Danny Ainge worked so long and so hard trying to figure out, and what Brad Stevens is now tasked to handle right now, and Ime Udoka obviously is head coach as well. What's the proper way, if you're building around these two guys, as we'd all like to see happen, what's the best way to do that? What do they need to be surrounded by?
Well, first of all, they need a point guard who's playing like Marcus Smart is playing right now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so therein right there is a big part of that mix. Since Marcus has come back, and I've always believed in Marcus's ability as a distributor. But it seems like the way he's playing now, maybe even a hyper focus on that. I don't know how to perfectly describe it, but you need a guy that's playing the way he is now, and that's huge for them. In terms of what the Celtics might be doing in this next week, I can tell you that as of a couple of weeks ago, they were hell bent at looking at a lot of things. The recent stretch of good basketball has seemed to calm things down. And, you can tell by the people I'm talking to around the league. At first it was like, hey, they're active. They want to get something done. They know this doesn't work. They know this needs to be fixed. And, I think for last year and this year, they were hoping for that fix to come from within. And for now, it appears that it has to a degree. So getting back to your original thought of, looking at the Celtics as they are now, I think everyone, and this is a team that I follow more closely for a couple of reasons, but and have over the last couple of years and well before that. But I think everyone is like, they get encouraged when things go well, and then they're probably not surprised when things backslide. So I think if you're following it, I think you're a little hesitant to say problems have been solved, because you look back at the game last Friday in Atlanta and go, where did that come from? Where was the aggressive defense, the getting back on defense? I mean, last night against Charlotte, the Celtics, Charlotte came back in that game, and the Celtics could have upped their defense a little bit at certain points, getting out to people, but they were getting back on defense, and they were hustling and back and playing the kind of transition ball offensively as well that, is kind of what their coaches have been begging for. So, I think that you're right. And I'm not sure that Josh Richardson is a guy that's really in the conversation for trades right now. I think they see him as a really important, valuable guy. The 3-pointers last night were a bonus, but they see him as one of those defensive wings they can put in a game and help them along that way there. So I think, Schroeder is very likely to be gone because, like a lot of teams around the league, they really want to get into that luxury tax and maintain that kind of flexibility. So, that's where they are now.
So everything you just said on Marcus Smart, I couldn't agree more. We spent most of our show last week talking about how, quite frankly, I think Marcus Smart is finally being utilized the right way. Like he's actually being used as a point guard. And, because we've been saying for years on this show, and you and others, have all been saying it, when he's used as more of a playmaker, a distributor, and not just the guy that, is going out there and taking heat checks and hero ball and forcing threes and doing whatever he's doing. Like he is within his role, beyond just the defensive side, offensively, within his role, when used the right way, he can be elite. I'm not talking about him being, an all-star or one of the great point guards in the league, but for what they need him to be, he can be elite within his role. Something, Brad Stevens has talked about for years, Bill Belichick, one of those mantras, like, do what we need you to do and do it to the best of your ability. That's all we want from you. And I think Marcus Smart, what he's doing right now, like you talked about, perfect fit. Keep doing it. Keep using him as a point guard, not a 2. Use him at the 1 in a true traditional sense. And I think that you do see some real net positives there. But I guess going back to what you were just saying about how, talks of or aggressiveness, for lack of a better word, has kind of cooled or calmed. There are a lot of people that get all up in my mentions on Twitter, Steve, that, anytime, like right now, anytime something is going well, I'll tweet, oh, they've won 5 out of 6 or 10 out of 14 or 3 in a row or whatever. And it's everything's fixed. This is great. Just everything will be fine. Why do anything, Brad? There's no need there. This cue up the duck boats, fire up the duck boats, all that stuff. And, I guess I would wonder, look, I'm enjoying this ride as much as anybody else when they play well, but is there a recency bias that can take you as management away from bigger picture issues? Can some wins and playing well on both ends of the floor for a couple of weeks mask larger problems that have existed for years, because it just feels like if the second an injury happens, doesn't even have to be a significant one. It could be like Marcus going down. I'm not talking about Jaylen or Jayson. Even a semi-significant injury happens or another COVID outbreak happens, and this team doesn't have the ability, or at least hasn't shown the ability, to fight through it the way, I don't know, a team like Miami has all year long without many of its best players.
Yeah, I would agree. That's one of the things too that I mentioned in an earlier article on Heavy, is that they were looking to maybe clear some people out to make room for more minutes for a Peyton Pritchard.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe that Aaron Nesmith can be a very good player for this team, but it's really hard for a shooter when you're getting in such limited opportunities, and every shot you take from the outside is an event rather than part of the flow. And I think you've got to get away from that. I remember in that story mentioning, I was talking to a GM and I said, you can't tell me that Nesmith, if given the opportunity and the encouragement, couldn't be a reasonable facsimile of a Duncan Robinson. And the response I got from a GM was, that's why Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the league. And the GM also mentioned the coach out in Memphis. And he said, that they don't just see what a guy is, they see what a guy can be, what can become, and they get him there. Further, I think a guy like Romeo Langford, the injury issues have got to be bothersome. But there's a guy that can help. So they've got some players there. But to your point, if an injury were to happen right now, are these guys ready? They haven't been playing much.
Right.
How long will it take them to get into that flow? And you can say, well, they're on the court every day. It's different. Being the game and having that confidence, you can do a ton otherwise, but it really, you have to have a belief in yourself, and that belief has to come from having accomplished something. From playing a stretch of games where you've played well. That's where it is.
I think you brought up something we've been highlighting going back to the offseason and wondering what it was going to take. And that is just, how Ime Udoka, again, a first-year head coach, he's been in the league for, a couple of decades in one capacity or another, but first-time head coach and, finding his footing here in the Celtics organization. But you look for patterns, and I think it's very easy to see that he either, doesn't like or simply doesn't trust the younger guys. The rotation when this team is healthy is so visibly apparent. You had it last night. He wants an 8-9 man rotation. You had it last night in this most recent game against Charlotte. It's your ideal starting five. It's Tatum, it's Brown, it's Horford, it's Smart, it's Robert Williams. Then off the bench, it's Grant Williams, it's Dennis Schroeder, and it's Josh Richardson. And maybe somebody will be on the move, like we said, with Schroeder or Richardson come the trade deadline. But at the moment, that's what the rotation is, which means the DNP-CDs did not play coach's decision. It's the kids. It's Peyton Pritchard, who it took a COVID outbreak for him to get an opportunity this year after being, a pretty steady, reliable contributor as a rookie last year under Brad Stevens. Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, you mentioned them as well. And I just don't think that, for whatever reason, if there's any, I don't know, sort of glaring whatever with this team in recent years, absent obviously four guys in particular, Tatum, Brown, Smart, all very high draft picks, and then Robert Williams, who was, even at the time, looked like a steal or potential steal at the end of the first round. Everybody else, we have seen concerns about their development process. And it just seems like these three guys are the next in line. And I don't want these three guys, be it here or elsewhere, I don't want them to be Shemi Ojale or Carson Edwards or, any of these guys that haven't worked out in recent years. I don't know. Look at like the Max.
You also don't want them to be like, Javonte Green, who goes and starts now for Chicago, or
Garrison Matthews, Max Strus, what he's doing this year for Miami is another guy that, they had in camp a couple years back. Like, how do we, is obviously something from a coaching standpoint, from a front office, from a personnel standpoint, there's something not ideal happening here in terms of identifying how young talent, can be useful to this team and can grow within their roles. And other teams like a Javonte Green, like a Garrison Matthews, like a Max Strus, other teams are finding out. And how do we hedge against that happening with these three guys here?
Well, it takes opportunity and it takes commitment on the part of your organization. Say, look, this is what we're going to go with here. And then in recent years, prior to last year, this was a team that was, a conference finalist type. And, so you can't necessarily be, wading really deep into that. You've got guys that are ready to win now, and you've got to develop that. And there were, again, issues with the one-on-one ball that they had to work through. So it wasn't like you were going to change a whole lot. But yeah, look, what's come back to me talking to people around the league is that, like, Ime is coaching like a first-time coach, and he's relying on guys, on the veterans. But this is not to be critical of Ime, because one of the biggest examples of this and how management handled the situation, came in 2007, after the Celtics acquired Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. Doc Rivers was begging Ainge for a veteran point guard. Mm-hmm. But Ainge really believed in this kid, Rondo. And Ainge would not make a move for a veteran point guard until later in the year, when he got Doc Sam Cassell. But by then, Rondo had proved himself. So basically, Danny forced Doc into going with the kid. And you see how it worked out. I mean, Rondo, that year was incredible. I mean, game 6 against the Lakers, Rondo dominated that game, if you recall. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I kept hearing that the Celtics were communicating to other teams. It's like, yeah, we want to move some guys so we can play these other guys. But to your point, now that they seem to have a rotation together, it's a little harder, and you've got to make your run when it's there, when you have it, when you have the opportunity. And, sometimes your hand is forced. If you look at the 2018-2019 season, Kyrie's last season here, that team was up and down all year. But you remember Kyrie saying, don't worry, we'll be fine in the playoffs. Why? Because we're really good and all this stuff. And and they were kind of, Brad Stevens was kind of forced to, we got to ride this out. There's the options. What are the options, with what we're going to do here? And then the Celtics sweep Indiana in the first round. And then they go out at game 1 at Milwaukee and wax the Bucks. Mm-hmm. I mean, they beat them handily. And it's like, well, maybe Kyrie was right all along. And you start checking the map about the earth, but then it all went away again. Second game, they got them right out of the playoffs. First, and boom. So you're kind of forced sometimes to go with what's there. And I think, when an opportunity strikes, as it appears to be right now for the Celtics, and I think the Celtics as an organization wish they had a few more meaningful games between now and the trade deadline, mm-hmm. so they could see if this is real or more real than it, more consistent anyway. But yeah, that's the situation they're in.
Yeah, I guess what frustrates me, probably a lot of fans out there, maybe you as well, is that, you look back to that season, like you're talking about, and it was one of those, if everything, like we figure our crap out, we get everything together, this is a championship contender, because they had that talent. This team, and I'm not, I'm not like insulting the talent on this team intentionally anyway, or intentionally disrespecting them, but this team, it would seem like to me, I don't know if you agree or disagree, their absolute ceiling, if everything broke right, is losing in the conference finals. To me, there's no path to which this team, as currently constituted, wins a championship. And you could just as easily see them, losing in round 2 as you could not getting out of the play-in tournament, because that's what kind of team it's been this year. They are 3 games over 500, and that's a season high. And look, compared to where we as followers of this team for a long while expect them to be, and quite frankly, having 2 of the bright young stars in this league in Tatum and Brown, 3 games over 500, Steve, kind of pathetic. Like, that's not something to hang your hat on. So I don't know. At some point, it feels like you need to take a step back, whether it's trading a Dennis Schroeder, not only to get under the luxury tax if that's the priority, but just to force Ime to work in some of these younger guys, a Pritchard, a Neesmith, to make them play, to make them be part of this rotation, to work on their development and their growth. Because I don't know, if we keep kind of spinning our wheels to, these are our guys and not developing anybody along the way, then you're not going to get anywhere. Teams that, for the most part, and every team, there are a lot of teams that have done it differently. Some have done it through free agency, some have done it through the draft, some have done it through some combination of those 2 things, and those are our champs over the last couple of decades, obviously. But this group, because there's no salary cap space coming, this group, if it's going to get done, it seems like it has to happen from within, absent these guys like in 2007 all being good enough to where you can package a bunch of them and bring in another star. So I don't know how you force that to happen.
Well, if you are frustrated like this, and I'm sure team followers of the team are similarly frustrated, what do you think it's like for the guys on the team?
Mm-hmm.
Which gets back to the recent piece I wrote. There has been, as was put to me by a Celtic person, there's not a player on this team that hasn't expressed his frustration at some point this year. Okay. And if you're talking about spinning your wheels, there it is. But with regard to the 2 main pieces, I think, they've realized all along, and they've talked all along about, you remember Jaylen Brown coming out and saying he has to, find out how to work. He and Jayson have to figure out how to work better together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think there's been a commitment with regard to that. How long that holds is important. But I think to what you're saying about the frustration and all that, and I probably should have tried better to frame the story this way, because this is the point I was trying to get across, is that there is an urgency to what's happening right now. Okay, that these guys want to be here and want to be Boston Celtics, and they're going to watch Kevin Garnett's number get retired, and they want to have that kind of success and be attached to a premier franchise in the sport they play. But if it's not going to work, they don't want to be, no one wants to be stuck in this situation, particularly, ownership. Patience is not going to be strong if this team isn't showing signs. Okay. This ownership didn't get to be this ownership. This franchise didn't get to be this franchise by saying, yeah, we'll just kind of roll along with this here. They make moves. They don't just sit tight if things aren't going the way that they want. And the definition of success in Boston is quite different than the definition of success in a lot of other NBA cities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, I know I keep racking my head about the thing that was written and how, and one other thing I really want to I think it's obvious to people that are in the media, but when you're putting it together a piece where you're using unnamed sources, which is where you get your best information from, particularly because people from other teams can't say these things to you and have their names attached because of tampering and things like that. Okay. You've got to watch how you present things, because it's like, well, don't put it this way because then they'll know it's for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of that. And you've got to protect sources.
Sure.
That's having developed sources is what's allowed me to do this job for a number of years and to build up trust. And if people think I've lost my mind and I'm going to start fabricating stuff at this point, that's fine. But it's not what's going to happen. I'm, not ever.
We've spent a while, I think, Steve, and when I say we, sort of the royal we, not you specifically, when Brad was head coach, spent the last couple of years, like Gary Washburn, every time he was on this show, we would talk about it, just sort of really dissecting his staff and questioning whether the makeup was right. Was he surrounded by the right people? And maybe, not that we ever didn't acknowledge this, but maybe didn't spend enough time talking about the makeup of the front office. And obviously, Danny's gone, Brad was elevated, but for the most part, things around him didn't change. It's still Mike Zarin, it's still Austin Ainge, it's still many of the key cogs who have been there, same voices. And I love those voices. I love those guys. It's not like calling for anybody's job or head on a plate or anything like that. But obviously, does this team, need some sort of a fresh perspective to take them, where ultimately they need to go around so much of what we've been talking about here on this show?
I think it's be careful what you wish for. I believe that the organization that they've got from ownership on down, is very strong. And as much as you can grouse about how they've been, where they've been the last couple of years, the last season and this, you have to look at it in the relative market. How many teams would kill to be in this position? How many teams have got front offices that are so messed up, over the years that there's been no continuity. It's like the NFL teams that change offensive coordinators every year or two, and the quarterback never develops. There's accountability. Look, there's a lot to quibble about with any GM's moves, and Danny Ainge is certainly not immune. But the one thing I've always said and written about Ainge, that the best thing you can say about him is that he never did his job to keep his job.
Yep. And
you look at how many teams that around the trade deadline, they kill themselves, the GM, and you can see it because you can tell from the trade talk that's happening, and you can tell from where it goes and where it doesn't go, that there are GMs, it's like, okay, our team's not doing well. I could make this really bold move. But if I make this bold move and it doesn't work out, it's my butt on the line. If I don't make a move, well, I can blame someone else. There are people that are out there trying to keep jobs. And you have to be able to have do the work, gather the knowledge, and then have the courage of your convictions. And, for any screw ups that Ainge has made, he rebuilt two really good teams. It built two really good teams, excuse me. The second one didn't work out for, a variety of reasons. I think it's an important part to look at, not just what this team is doing, but what it's doing relative to whatever else is out there. When the Celtics made the trade with Brooklyn, that killed Brooklyn, except to the point where Brooklyn got so bad that it had space, and you had a Kyrie Irving who was leaving a good situation that decided, and goes and creates a new one there because he's able to pull, not only take himself, but pull in a Kevin Durant. And right there, I mean, look, and let's pause to say this, for anything that you think about Kyrie Irving, and we could think a lot of things about him. He is, I'm not sure about you, but he is one of the most talented players I've ever seen in basketball. I mean, just incredibly. This guy is...
Nobody's ever had a better ball handle.
Wow. I mean, the stuff he does, which makes it kind of disappointing or depressing that, that the other stuff comes with it, because, man, this is a guy that should be among the people in the real pantheon of this league every year. He should be one of the faces of the league in terms of talent and what he can accomplish. I mean, the Cavaliers don't win. His shot won him that, wins him that championship. And so, getting back, I know I've kind of dribbled off here. yeah, I've kind of pulled what we don't like about the Celtics. I've just kind of dribbled too much here. And I should pass it back.
I wasn't going to go down this road at all, but if anyone has the intel, you have the intel, and we've talked about him enough times here on this show. Is Danny Ainge in Utah now because he got bored in retirement, or because he wanted to change from Boston?
No, I think, well, I think both. A friend of his took ownership of Utah, and what Ainge is doing out there is not what he did here. He is not like a day-to-day involved with the basketball ops thing. He's doing other parts of the organization. It's a much more relaxed situation. So I think that's what he was looking at. And frankly, we kind of forget the fact this man had, 2
multiple heart attacks.
Yeah, it's that's I think he's been fine physically, I guess, which is good. But those kind of things will that's kind of a knock at your door to like, hey, here's your morning wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
The ticker's not acting properly.
Yeah.
Maybe think about this.
Is he still I guess I would imagine the answer is yes, but not knowing fully how it all works once guys become, rivals. I know there's still a trust factor there, and there's previous history, and people work together and they move on and work at different places. But I don't know, can he still be a sounding board for Brad Stevens in the way that he was before, obviously, he went to Utah? Or is that relationship sort of, I'm sure it's still obviously very strong, but is it just different now?
I'm sure it's different. I don't know if they talk. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess, and this is just, okay, this is not from sources. This is pure speculation.
Just a guess.
Okay? I'm going to guess that Danny Ainge is still talking to Austin Ainge. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, it's fair assumption.
I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, but if they're at a holiday dinner,
yeah.
Pass the gravy, things like that might get spoken. So yeah,
it's like Blue Bloods. It's the family business.
Yeah, I don't think it can't be like it was before, but there are relationships around the league between front office people on different teams. What can you tell me about this guy? What can be done here? What do you think about this? Teams communicate with each other, not just at high levels, but certainly through back channels. I mean, it's when everyone thinks about how much stuff gets written and put out there, especially around trade deadline times, multiply that by 1 billion. And that's the kind of talk that goes around. And realize this too. It's not just the general managers or whatever the title may be, president of basketball operations for each team, but those people have people working underneath them. Mike Zarin was making a ton of the phone calls in Boston, doing a lot of the legwork on trades and trade proposals on, what do you have that we might want? What do we have that you might want? Mm-hmm. Is there a way to get this together? And then below that, there are these personnel guys that not only ones that work in the office that are, pro personnel guys, but there are personnel guys for teams that travel around. Teams will have advanced scouts that, when you're going to play a team 3 games hence, they'll be checking out what your plays are, what you're running, and giving you a full scouting report. Those same teams also have people that go out and just catch as many NBA games as they can to look at players that they might want to trade for. The reason I've been able to write about trades over the years is, or know that have an inkling that something might be coming up, is that you'll see people at games. People will be talking to you. What about this? What about that? And if you're at a Celtics game really early, I'm not sure how early the doors open up, but if you get there, some of the people you see sitting on the bench are not part of either team that's playing that night. They are personnel guys who get out there before the doors open up, and they're watching guys just go through their pregame routines. Maybe guys that don't play very much because they want to see what is this guy's range, what are his work habits. They look at things like that. So when a guy at the end of the Celtics bench is out there before the game, he needs to realize that he's auditioning for someone. There are pro personnel guys in the building that are watching, pretty much every game. And, that's all those things get taken into account. And then there are teams that still screw it up. But, but it's about information gathering. And, that's the business.
So I have two more quick things for you before I let you go. One is, this is just kind of a thought exercise. I really kind of put it out there just for fun on Twitter, as I do a lot of things, especially when it's a poll. It's like, I was thinking about this. What do you think, kind of thing? And just to, I don't know, gauge reaction. And so I don't know if you saw this, but I put up a poll yesterday as we sit here, and it said, Robert Williams for Domantas Sabonis, would you do it? And we've got, I don't know, 45, closing in on 4,500 votes, something like that. And a whole lot of, comments and quote tweets and everything, people, Celtics and Pacers perspectives, and everybody defending their guy as you'd expect. But the votes have honestly, sort of highlighted that. The choices were absolutely no way and depends on the rest of the deal. And the breakdown, absolutely 36.3%. No way, 37.8%. Depends on the rest of the deal, 26%. I don't even know which. Okay. What's that?
How many votes? Can you look at how many votes are out there? How many votes does the no way have right now?
Whatever the math is, it's 38% of 4,300.
Okay, well, you've got to figure out that at least half of those are Chris Forsberg.
Exactly. Very, very important. That's true. He's going to a lot of different accounts and voting from all his colleagues' accounts at NBC Sports Boston.
He's sending people from around the, look at how many votes you're getting on that from Bolivia. I think Chris has got contacts there. No, my man Forsberg, he's been on this train for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important and Sabonis is a very good passer too. Comes from his father, who was an incredible passer.
Yeah.
But players on the Celtics love playing with Rob Williams because the ball keeps moving. He can cover up for a defensive mistake, which isn't even necessarily a defensive mistake. It's just sometimes you get beat, and he can erase that problem. So it'd be hard to give up on Rob Williams when I think he's getting better. I remember his first training camp, first summer league, excuse me, and Scott Morrison, who was a Celtic assistant here for a while, and is now coach of a team in Australia. Very funny guy, subtly funny, wry. They assign assistant coaches to work with certain players, and Alex Barlow was assigned to work with Rob Williams. But anyway, we're watching Rob at summer league, and more importantly at the practices they had. And we were at this practice at this high school out in the Las Vegas area, in one of the suburbs out there. And I'm just watching this guy, and after practice, I'm just like shaking my head, like marveling. It's like I went over, I was standing next to Morrison, and I said, if this guy doesn't become a star, man, it's his own fault. and Scott, and it was a joke, but he just turns and goes, and Alex is too, right? But no, I think the world of this guy and what he is now. And I think the biggest issue with him was the injuries. Could he overcome that and be a consistent player? But, you look at him at the free throw line and you say, okay, his outside, his 12 to 15 footer is going to get better too. You know what I mean? He's going to be able to be used in that way. But, when he gets a rebound, the fast break is started right away. Yep. Whereas, a lot of times and not lately, which is one of the biggest signs I look for. But before that, a rebound would come and someone would get it and start dribbling up the court, and not necessarily in as quick a way as possible, but getting the ball and getting it out quickly to start a fast break, or it's imperative with the way that today's defenses are so well structured and developed. So, and I think Rob's a big part of that.
All right, last thing for you, and I know you're not a hot take guy, so I'm not looking for a hot take. I do want a prediction, and I guess I'll offer it to you in a leading way, although feel free to go in a different direction with it if you want. Will Dennis Schroeder being traded is that scenario anyway the most monumental move we'll see a week from now?
I think that would be the smart betting. But what's funny is that there's kind of a double-edged sword with that, because Dennis Schroeder does a lot of really good things. And, there are things you might miss when he's gone. I would agree with the move. I think it's important to get another pace guy on the floor in Peyton Pritchard. And I think that they've got enough to handle that, enough options, particularly if Josh Richardson stays, with how you when you go to the bench to match up with certain lineups, you've got some pretty versatile defenders. But yeah, I think that's the most likely situation.
Always enjoy having you on the show, Steve. You know that, and it's just fun being able to dive into all things Celtics and NBA with you. It is a pleasure. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. Good to speak with you.
The show will be back at you next week. Make sure you join us. We'll be that much closer to the trade deadline, maybe even wait until after and then react to it the next morning. We'll see. For Evan, who of course is producing, so still with us in some form, I'm Adam Kaufman. We'll talk to you soon.